Hey, welcome to Cloud and Sec. In this video, I'm talking about endpoint data loss prevention. This is a capability that in Microsoft security stack relies on a couple different things, but mostly Microsoft Purview. When we look at deploying such a capability, oftentimes we would see in the past the need for us to deploy specific technologies and specific agents to enforce that sort of capability. Within the Microsoft 365 stack, though, the benefit is that you just need to onboard your devices to Purview. There's a couple ways to do that. So you can just onboard them to Purview if you are not a Microsoft Defender for Endpoint customer. So you don't need Defender for Endpoint in that scenario. Or if you are a Microsoft Defender for Endpoint customer, it's even easier. It's just a couple click buttons to click, and then you're set to go essentially. And there's nothing else to deploy. So it's really easy to get started with it. And the granularity of capabilities and things that we can enforce to is very, very interesting, very powerful. Let's jump into our documentation, have a look at what Endpoint DLP can do and how we can get started with it from the dashboard perspective. Let's dive in. First off, let's take a look at the official documentation. So Microsoft 365 Purview, Endpoint DLP, Data Loss Prevention. I'm going to put this documentation in the description naturally, but it includes a list of all the things the activities that we can monitor and take action on with Endpoint DLP. This to me is just a great description of what we can expect to achieve with Endpoint DLP. So what kind of activity can we monitor as security agents for this capability? The ability to upload to cloud service or access by unallowed browsers, for example. So we can set up a list of allowed browsers in our platform and ensure that our users are only using those browsers to handle sensitive information, for example. And there's further details on the list here on what can be done and can't be done for this particular rule. For example, this particular rule detects when a user attempts to upload an item to a restricted service domain or access an item through a browser. If they're using a browser that is listed in a DLP as unallowed, the upload activity is blocked and the user is redirected to use Microsoft Edge. Edge then either allows or blocks the upload or access based on the DLP policy configuration. So then what can we do with that policy? We can block, warn, or audit when protected files are allowed to be uploaded or prevented from being uploaded to cloud services based on the allow unallowed domain list in global settings. That's an example of that policy. Another action we can take a look at is copy to another application. So this particular rule or particular capability detects when a user attempts to copy information from a protected item and then paste it on another app, process, or item. It also detects when a user copies and pastes content among files within the same application, process, or item for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So we're monitoring how your users are interacting with sensitive information types and when they're copying information that way. We can also naturally copy to USB or monitor when users are copying data to USB removable data. When they're copying to network share, printing a document, copying to a remote session for administrators, this is particularly important. Copying to a Bluetooth device as well. Creating an item. So we can detect the creation of an item. We can detect the renaming of an item. Copying to clipboard, access by unallowed applications as well. So these are examples of use cases for when you would use Endpoint DLP. Great. Now, I'm going to leave this document here for reference for if you are thinking about deploying this to your environment to overlook at or have a look at the best practices for Endpoint DLP policies. I'm not going to be covering everything in this video, right? So what I want to touch on is having a look at Microsoft Purview, what the initial setup looks like for this integration with Defender for Endpoint, which I have set up in my environment, and how to get started with these settings. Let's go there. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is jump into Microsoft Purview, and then on the left hand side of the menu, I can head over to settings. Under settings, I have the device onboarding option. So I need to ensure that my devices are onboarded to be included in these compliance solutions. Okay, let's click there, have a look at device onboarding. Now, while it's loading, just a shout out that I've been helped by and coached by a Microsoft fellow colleague on how to do this. So I hugely appreciate Reshmi's help on me understanding this and knowing how to get started on this. So thank you, Reshmi. Cool. Now, devices onboarding, what can we do? So if I hadn't onboarded yet, I would have been given a blue button to just start onboarding devices, right? And then I'd have to choose how to onboard devices, right? So if I have the integration with Defender for Endpoint, which I do, it's just a matter of clicking a couple buttons, and after a few minutes, this list is populated with all devices that I have Defender for Endpoint running that are onboarded to Endpoint DLP. If, however, I don't have Defender for Endpoint, all I have to do is come to the onboarding section and then manually onboard each device using the script provided by the platform. Very easy. The next step after you onboard the devices is to navigate to our Endpoint DLP settings. So let's bring up the menu, DLP prevention or data loss prevention section. We have the Endpoint DLP settings. That's the next step we have to take. From here, we're going to create the rules upon which our Endpoint DLP is going to work. So that's very crucial. Before you get started with configuring everything in here, I do recommend you head over to the official documentation, which explains and details each and every option that you have available here. For example, if we look at the first option, advanced classification, scanning, and protection, you need to understand what this is, right? So the matter of fact is that a very comprehensive description is provided by the official documentation. And let me just read you the first paragraph and explain what it is. Advanced classification, scanning, and protection allow the Microsoft Purview cloud-based data classification to service to scan items, classify them, and return the results to the local machine. So you can take advantage of classification techniques such as EDM, exact data match classification, and named entities in your DLP policies. The key thing about advanced classification, for example, is that it requires bandwidth between your endpoints, your users' devices, to communicate and send data to a Purview for these classification methods to work on these devices essentially in real time, if you will, right? So when the advanced classification is turned on, content being sent from this local device to cloud services requires bandwidth, right? So if bandwidth usage is a concern, you can set a limit on how much bandwidth can be used on a rolling 24-hour period. So there are a few options here, and then it states what kind of operating systems support advanced scanning protection, all the different Windows 10 and Windows 11 versions that support it, and what file formats and platforms supported or applications supported, such as Office applications and PDF file types, for example. Okay, going back to Endpoint DLP settings, you'll then you can have a look at all the different options available here. So the usual file path exclusions, if you have specific paths in your Windows devices that you do not want to monitor in your policies, you can add them here. So if for privacy reasons you need to set up specific user profiles not to be included in monitoring, you could do that from here. You can do that for Mac as well. If you do have the need to collect evidence for sensitive files that are triggered within particular alerts, you can set up this evidence collection here for file activities on devices. This creates a storage so that all the files uploaded are stored in there for you. Now, I don't want to go through everything in here, but I want to highlight the browser and domain restrictions to sensitive data, which is where we state what browsers are allowed for our users to handle sensitive information type. So if we do not want our users to upload sensitive information types, type data, or label data to specific browsers, we can by ensuring that these browsers are in our unallowed list, for example. And in this list, I added, for example, Firefox just as an example for later use. But if I click on add or edit unallowed browsers, you're going to see the list of all the different browsers that are available here by default for you to just choose and put this in this list. That depends on your policies, naturally, on your business decisions for block these particular browsers or not. There's also the ability for us to either block or allow service domains and controlling sensitive data to these service domains. And that's done at an endpoint level, right? So there are other layers, other ways to do that, to block that through a CASB, for example, and zero trust will come in there as well. But Endpoint DLP can block service domains from or sensitive information types and protected files to be uploaded to these service cloud domains from Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome if they have the Purview extension installed in them, right? So if the users are handling your sensitive data through these browsers and they're attempting to upload this data to a particular service domain, or they are not going to be able to, or they are according to your policy. In my example, I created one cloud service domain here for ServiceNow. That's just an example, but I could add whatever other domain I want. So this is a free text, right? There's no recommendations here, just a free text for whatever service domain you are thinking of. So if we think about DLP in a more controlled manner, or even in another scenario, we could block all kinds of different browsers, only ensuring that our users are leveraging either just Google Chrome in Microsoft Edge, for example, and we're creating a service domain block for AI systems, for example, that we don't want them to access and send sensitive data to, for example, right? So that's an example that we can look into. Before I just finish up with the list of other settings, I want to highlight additional settings for Endpoint DLP. This is where we can set up policy tips for users and customize them here if we wanted to. So we can have the default options in the custom text box, or we can choose other options, only show default options or only show custom text box, for example. And then whenever your policy states that your users should be given a block with override, that's when they're going to be shown this business justification policy tips that you're setting up in here. So that's a very quick look at some of the options for endpoint settings. I've turned some of them on just for us to have a look in a few minutes. Really, what's next for us is to head over to data loss prevention policies and ensure that we have a policy that is using that location of endpoint. So let's create a policy for endpoint DLP now. So this is the usual experience that you would have seen before, even through me. So I'm going to go through the template through a custom policy, set up a policy with a proper name for it. I'm not going to choose any admin units. And then under locations, I will be very specific and just choose endpoint. There you go, just devices. And I'm going to apply to every user's, and no one's going to be excluded. Now let's define policy settings. Let's create a rule. The condition then is going to be that the content contains a particular sensitive information type. So we're ensuring that we're blocking our users from handling that data through different browsers. So whatever file is tagged with this sensitive information type, with high confidence, whatever action I want to take, that's going to be taken. And the action that I want to take is to audit or restrict activities when users access sensitive sites in Edge or Windows devices. I could alternatively choose the other option to audit or restrict activities on devices altogether, not just on domains. Let's take that option, right? So when specified activities are detected on devices for files containing the sensitive information type that I've chosen, that Zelda project SIT, you can choose to only audit the activity, block it entirely, or block it, but allow users to override with restriction. Okay, so what do I want this policy and this rule to do for me for that particular sensitive information type on endpoints? So service, domain, and browser activities, essentially what I was configuring just before my Endpoint DLP settings. I want to detect when protected files are blocked or allowed to be uploaded to cloud service domains based on the allow block cloud service domains list that I created before. Right, so upload, I want to monitor when someone is attempting to upload a restricted cloud service domain from an unallowed browsers, and I want to block with override. I can then choose different restrictions for sensitive information service domain restrictions as well. I didn't set that up before, so I'm going to skip this, and then I can allow them to paste information to supported browsers, right? So what do I want to do when that particular activity is flagged? I want to block with override as well. I just want to block with override so that we get to see that notification and also the validation that we're actually identifying that SIT. And then I have file activities for all applications. Right, so what do I want to allow users to do with that sensitive information type? Do I want to allow them to copy to clipboard? Well, I want to audit that, sure. So then I can block them to copy to removable USB devices. I can block them from copying to network share. I can block them from printing even. So let me set that up to block with override. And then I can even choose other options like blocking Bluetooth and or blocking copy of that data to RDP. So as I continue to look into other options here, I could have a look at file activities for applications in restricted applications group. Now I didn't configure that setting in the Endpoint DLP settings, so I'm going to skip this just for our sake here. Now next in the policies, same as we did before, we can set up user notifications to inform users of policy tips, right, on how to properly use corporate sensitive information, right, to educate them. So then for endpoint devices, as you can see here, we have a toggle here for it. So this is showing users policy notification tip when an activity is restricted. This is turned on when you select the block for an activity in Windows. To turn off the notifications, disable the restrictions. So for me, I wanted to enable this. I don't want to customize the notification. That's fine with the default one. And then I can require a business justification to override, such as I configured in Endpoint DLP settings. That is exactly what I want to do. Now, under incident reports, we can create alerts for administrators when a rule match occurs. And then we can send alert every time an activity matches the rule as well for administrators. So same settings that we had before for the rules with the additional narrowed down scope for endpoint data there. There you go, I just saved it, it validated, went through. I can have a summary of all the things I've chosen to restrict and control here. And then I'm going to set it to on right away and finish it up. Now it's validating again. It's going to take a few minutes for it to be validated and put through in action. Now what I wanted to do is just jump into my demonstration device here. Okay, so just double checking the policies. I can see that I have my new Endpoint DLP policy set up and that it's turned on. So now we can flick over to my user experience and have a look at what that looks like. Here I am in my demonstration user desktop. What I have in this desktop is this user has access to a sensitive file. So this is a file that has been categorized with that sensitive information type. And it actually tells me that this is a test file, and this is what exactly it contains, that particular sensitive information file. Now I don't have a Microsoft Word, I only have WordPad, and when I open it up, I just get a banner here at the top stating that I might not have full access to it because, yeah, I don't have Word per se. I have WordPad, and that's fine. For the test, I just want to ensure that this file is categorized as under that SIT. What I want to test on my Endpoint DLP policy is then open up my browser. I downloaded Firefox, and remember I created an endpoint setting that does not allow Firefox browser to handle sensitive information type, right? So users cannot upload files from Firefox. Now, the test that I want to attempt to do and what I wanted to do is upload a file from Firefox. So the easier way that I can think of is just leveraging FileBin. It's just a service that I don't need any authentication to upload files to. Now, if I head over to my downloads and I attempt to upload a random file here, let me try this one here. It's a little older. There we go. It is going on. It's, as a matter of fact, it's just uploaded. Now, what I want to do is upload more files. When I attempt to upload more files, I want to select that one that contains the sensitive information type. And when I attempt to do so, me as a user, I get this notification. So my organization policy does not allow me to open this file in a different browser or in this particular manner. So it tells the user to try opening through Microsoft Edge. That's a great action. So it means I cannot upload this sensitive information file through a browser who I don't maintain or which I do not support as an IT or IT business. Great. Now let me flick over to Microsoft Edge. Here I am, Microsoft Edge. Let me perform the same actions under FileBin. There we go. Let me try and upload that file through Microsoft Edge and see what happens. There you go. I can do it. That is because I did not create a particular DLP policy to completely block upload of this file to external services. I could have done that, but I didn't do. And to my example, it manages to block from undesirable browsers. What I could also do is block this entire domain entirely from Microsoft Edge. So remember, we have the service domains construct within Endpoint DLP settings. I could have added filebin.net to block whatever file is being sent to that particular domain. I have not done so. That's why I can still do it from Microsoft Edge and not from unallowed browsers. So just a quick example, really. So this was a very short look at Endpoint DLP settings in Purview, how to block specific browsers or even services through the policy and Endpoint DLP settings in Purview. There's a lot more to cover that I didn't touch on here today. Naturally, this could take hours to go through in details, but I just wanted to give a glimpse at what Endpoint DLP settings look like within Purview. Thank you for your time, and hopefully you found this informative and of a good use of your time. If you did, please subscribe and leave a like, and drop a comment for me to know what is also in your top of mind. Thank you.